and they came to Capernaum. These words could have described myself and a group of 50 folks from my church back in February. We came to Capernaum, and it was amazing. And we got off the bus, and there was a little ripple of thunder, and then a heavy roll of thunder, and we walked up to see the site, the synagogue, the house of Peter, and then it really began to thunder loudly, and I was thinking, hey, these are cool, theological sound effects we have going, but then it started hailing. And I don't mean like little bits of ice. I mean golf ball-sized chunks of hail. And there's nowhere to go. We're high, we get under the trees, the hail is hitting us, it's hurting people on the head. It was really cool. And it reminded me of that famous thing that all clergy know this, the thing about Annie Dillard talking about, if we think about the power that we so blithely invoke and worship, we should wear crash helmets. And I've said this actually to my people before, and what's amazing to me is I say that to them and they nod. They think that's a cool thing for the preacher to say. But the problem is, when I look out at them, they're not wearing hard hats. They're not ducking. In fact, instead of hail, what I think they have is dust. It's the dust of boredom. Diary of a country priest. The guy begins by talking about his parish. He said, my people were bored stiff. He said, it's like the dust. You don't really notice it until you get really still, and then it settles. Being bored. This is dissonance, isn't it? Our people are bored. Sometimes we're bored. The dissonance is that Jesus was amazing and the people who heard him were amazed. So I prepared a sermon on this. This is how to be amazing in the pulpit in 4 easy steps. Not really. Actually, I don't know how to be amazing. I've never tried very hard. It does seem to me that as kind of a baseline, we might try to figure out how to be amazed. And it could be if we are amazed, then the people who hear us might think of Jesus as amazing. It's hard to be amazed the longer you're in ministry. I envy my daughter. She's just leaving seminary. She's still at that gaga, heady, excited stage. I don't want to whisper in her ear, give it a few years, honey. She'll be going through that lectionary cycle for the first time. But I'm at the point that it's like, is it year A, B, or C? I can't even remember anymore. Dust that old thing off, preaching. It becomes more, I mentioned in my lecture yesterday the story about the preacher who dreamed that he was preaching, and when he woke up, he was. This habitual kind of boredom in ministry life, I don't know if this is a proper illustration or not, but I read it recently, one of Nick Hornby's novels. He talks about his marriage with his wife's kind of gone stale, and he says, we have sex, but it's not all that amazing anymore. He says it's kind of like you get in an elevator and you push a button and it goes up, and I shouldn't have told that. Seemed fitting at the time. It may be that over time these texts come to seem less useful to us, or maybe the problem is they are useful to us. Thomas Merton somewhere says that the problem that clergy have is that something profound and theological comes to us. We don't let it in. What we do is we go, that goes in a sermon. I'll use that in my Bible study. I'll email it. We always deflect it away from us. Or maybe it's this. When I came out of seminary, I planned to be John Chrysostom, and maybe you did too. You want to be a powerful prophetic preacher and talk about the big issues of the day. But what happens, is you try it one time, and there's this electrical shock from the people who are not begging you to speak on the social issues of the day, and you recoil, and you say, no, it's okay, I'm going to be courageous, I'm going to be tough, and you do it again, and it's just operant conditioning. After a while, not going there. I'm just not going there anymore. Or maybe it's the denominations in which we serve. I recently had lunch with a guy. We'd been colleagues in ministry for years, but we'd never had a meal together. So we ate, and during the lunch, he said, James, I've tried to hate you for years. And I said, thank you for trying. I don't. What is that about? He said, well, I've envied you. You've gotten the good jobs, and you're a delegate to things. He said, but I've worked it out. Don't hate you. I said, thank you. And then he said, it's not that I mind you being chosen, it's that I struggle with being unchosen. I was struck by that, being the unchosen. We live in a culture, I don't know what you call it, postmodern, post-postmodern, I don't know what the culture is. But it's the kind of culture that if you happen to be amazed temporarily, deconstruction will set in and you're just not amazed any longer. And I think of the line in Gail Godwin's novel about Father Melancholy who says this, I came along too late, you see. The church I wanted to serve started crumbling a long time ago. It's been my fate to preside over its final humiliations. Nobody gives a damn about symbols anymore. So I've tried to think about all this, and I've tried to work on my own amazability, and I want to report on that to you in the sermon. G.K. Chesterton said, the world does not lack for wonders, only a sense of wonder. So how do we come again to have a sense of wonder? How do we work on our amazability? Let me suggest a few things. One is that we decide to stop having all the answers and being right. I thought that's what I went to seminary for, right? So that when people come to me, I could give them the answers and to be right. But I'm in this very interesting book club that met on Monday night before I came here. Fascinating group, a bunch of atheists and me. And we read this guy out of the 16th century, Michel Montaigne, who wrote his famous essays. And the guys in my group loved Montaigne because, see, in the 16th century, everybody else was telling you what you ought to do, right? Luther did, Calvin did, Council of Trent. Everybody was telling people what to do, but Montaigne, he didn't try to tell anybody what to do. He always reserved judgment. He simply noticed what was there and celebrated whatever he noticed in front of him. It occurred to me as my atheist friends and I talked about this, that the clergy would do better if instead of telling everybody what they ought to do and what they ought to think, we might just notice what's out there and celebrate the beauty and the wonder of what is before us. We don't have to have all the right answers. It's interesting, Jesus came and he amazed the people. And what does Mark say? And they questioned among themselves. You'd expect it to say, and after that they had all the right answers. But no, it was, and they questioned among themselves. People who are amazed get the facts wrong all the time. This is what Bill Placker said about the resurrection accounts. You read them in the Gospels, they conflict, they don't really make sense, they can't be harmonized very well. And Placker said, well, of course, you're talking about encountering a resurrected person. Of course, you're not going to get the story straight. Of course, you're going to get your accounts wrong. They just blurted out whatever they thought they saw and believed. Maybe we stammer more than we are eloquent in preaching. I say that, by the way, because I come to this event and I hear the other speakers, and they're all so eloquent. I just stumble over my words. And let me suggest it's not the worst thing. When I was at Duke Divinity School, we used to have a talent show every year, and there was one section of it where you would imitate professors, and people would try to guess who it was. This is great fun. And a friend of mine, here was his. He walked out on stage, and he simply did this. Everyone said, if you're a Dookie, you know, Tom Langford. Dean Langford would be lecturing on, the Trinity or Christology, and he'd have sentences going, and then it'd break down, and then he would just, it was lovely. He flawlessly expressed what it is to look into the heart of the Trinity or to think about Jesus. Once in a while, we see someone like a teacher who is amazing or who really seems amazed. Also, if you're a Dookie from the dark ages, like when I was there. My favorite professor ever was a man named Roland Murphy. Father Murphy was Roman Catholic. He was 6'7", deep, booming voice. He loomed, ranged around the room. I've talked to a bunch of people who studied with him, and we all agree, greatest teacher ever. And then I'll ask them, can you tell me anything that he said? No one knows. No one can remember a word. What we all remember, though, are sounds that came from him. Not words, sounds. He'd be holding his Bible, and he would come to something that was difficult, and he would go, or he'd come to something that was really rich and profound, and he would go, Kind of sort of like a bear that had just chomped down on a piece of meat or something. It was unforgettable. He was amazed by what he saw in the Scriptures. Unforgettable. How do we come to be amazed? Here's some ideas. I emailed a few people before I came. I said, what would you like me to talk about at the festival? And several said, tell us about your sermon preparation. I started working on that, and it was just so embarrassing and chaotic, I thought I'd better talk about something else. You hear about the people, don't you, who say that they prepare an hour for every minute of the sermon? Oh my gosh, how do you get that done? I just can't fathom that. Sermon ought to be really good. Like, I got stuff to do. Are you kidding me? So here's a better suggestion, although, full disclaimer, I've never personally tried this. But still, for every minute of your sermon that you're going to preach, go out the week before and be amazed. How about that? To work on your amazability. And I made a little list of things that you might do to help yourself be amazed. Take a skydiving lesson. Do you know the Steve Martin movie Bowfinger? And Eddie Murphy plays this character, Jeff Ramsey, and they shoot the scene where they want him to run across this freeway where cars are going back and forth. And he does it, and finally gets to the other side. Whew, do that in your sermon preparation. Go snorkeling. See what's under there. Here's something I did recently. Go to a bar downtown wherever you live at midnight. My wife and some of her coworkers recently did what is called a bar crawl. And they insisted that I drive because they thought they might not be in a condition to drive. And I was to pick them up at this bar downtown at midnight. I parked the car. Oh my goodness! You should do this. It will help your preaching. You can ask me later if I mean the driving or the bar crawl. Go out at night and look for a meteor shower. Ride a roller coaster. My son and I have been all over this country. We've ridden them all. I'll give you a recommendation. It'll help you be amazed. Train to be a docent in an art museum. And then what you'll learn to do is walk around and go, oh my, look at that. I mean, that's what the preacher's supposed to do, right? Not be clever and witty, but look at that. Go where my church goes in Haiti. We go to the poorest place in Haiti. That's pretty amazing. There's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no phone signal. And these are the poorest people on God's good earth. And Sunday morning comes, and it's just so interesting, because where I am, we debate, what do you wear to church? Are we casual? No, you go to the poorest place in Haiti, every person there, all the little boys and men own a suit. All the little girls and women own a dress. And they put them on, and they start singing before the sun comes up. Go there. You'll be amazed. It'll help your preaching. Think about somebody like Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers. Maya Lynn once took him to see a clock that she had designed that hangs in New York's Penn Station. Here's what a reporter said. Mr. Rogers craned his neck. He leaned back from his waist and opened his mouth wide with astonishment, like someone trying to catch a peanut he had tossed into the air. Right? I like that. Mr. Rogers lived in a state of astonishment. And the astonishment showed when people, absolute strangers, walked up to him and fed his hungry ear with their whispers. He turned to me with an open, abashed mouth and said, "Oh, Tom, if you could only hear the stories I hear." I would suspect that what will help us in preaching is to put aside the commentaries and all the books about how to be a slick pastor and think about the things that have been whispered to us. I'm driving back to Charlotte later today. Tomorrow I have a funeral for a 25-year-old young woman who belonged to our church. She said something amazing to me the other day. See, she's a quadriplegic, and she's not let that bother her in the least. She has a job. She's one of our best mission volunteers, one of our best teachers. She knew that her health was declining, and she could barely talk the other day. You know what she said to me? She said, "If I can't keep the active life that I've had, I've lived long enough." Or I think about this. Our denomination just had our general conference, and this is like people in hell hope they don't have to go there, right? It's reminding me, by the way, of the joke that only clergy understand, which is a clergy person dies, and he sees a friend in the afterlife, and he looks around and he says, "Man, compared to parish ministry, heaven's great." And his friend said, "This isn't heaven." So I'm at the general conference, and it's just totally disgusting, and you need to take a shower for 5 days after you come home after. But yet there are moments of incredible beauty, and I'll tell you the most beautiful moment. I've been real involved in the debates over homosexuality, and I've been on the side of those who think we need to figure out how to be inclusive. And you develop a lot of cool friends this way. And one is a man who, this is amazing to me, he's had a lifetime partner for 30 years. He's a great musician, and he keeps coming back to a church that keeps saying no to him. He keeps coming back to a church that's been mean to him. He keeps coming back. He keeps praising God. At one point during the conference, he sent me a text. He said, "Come over here for a minute." So I went over there, and he said, he named someone. He said, "This guy wants to meet with me." And the guy who wanted to meet with him is kind of the commandant of the anti-gay forces, and he'll manipulate systems, he'll rouse up. He is dead set against homosexuality and has been for a long time. He said, he wants to meet with me. I said, "Don't trust him." You know what Mark said to me? He said, "James, you're wrong." He said, "That man's got a good heart. That man can change. I believe in the grace of God." You see, this commandant looks at him and says he's not holy. But then here's the one who's viewed as not holy, looking at the one so full of rage and rancor. And he says, "James, he's got a good heart. I believe in the grace of God." The things that people whisper amaze us. Years ago, I was with a close friend dying of cystic fibrosis in the hospital. She was in one of her last days, and her mother was there, and her mother was at night. Her mother was looking out the dark window into just the nothingness, and I was getting ready to leave, and I said, "Mrs. Armistead, would you like me to pray before I go?" She waved off that suggestion. She said, "Pray if you want. Nobody's listening." See, I think that's amazing. It's amazing, isn't it, that love can be that painful, that love can be that deep, that people's faith in God really is in the idea that God will help us and that God should hear us. And when do we most see God? It's at that moment, isn't it? Isn't it? When Jesus is on the cross and Jesus waves off belief in the dark and says, "My God, why? Why have you forsaken me?" Amazement. I would suggest one other thing. That is, try to explain the gospel to Jews or Muslims. I've done this a few times recently. I've volunteered to come over to their place. I said, "I want to tell you what Christianity is about." And I don't prepare ahead of time. I just walk in, and they'll say, "Okay, dude, what do you believe?" And I'm not even sure what I'm going to say, but I always wind up saying something like this. I say, "Yeah, I know it's crazy, and you guys believe in one God, and that God's up there, and God's immortal and infinite and all that." I said, "I'm just somebody that doesn't work for me. That's too hard for me. And so what I believe, and I know it's crazy and it's irrational, it makes no sense at all, is that God really wanted us to know God, and God really wanted us to love God. And so what God did, it's so weird, I know, is that God became like me. And God didn't come as like a strong person. God came as like just a little infant. And everybody we talk to has been an infant. You were once an infant yourself. You were totally vulnerable. You couldn't make anything happen. You couldn't control anything. You didn't know anything. Somebody loved you. There was grace. And it works for me. And I also think about dying. And it was not today. I hope I live a while, but I'm going to die at some point. And it seems awful, but it helps me To think that like God's been in that somehow. I haven't converted anybody yet, but it helps me to tell it. It helps me to be amazed. Again, look in a mirror. I'm almost done. Look in a mirror. St. Augustine said this: men go to gape at mountain peaks, at the boundless tides of the sea, the broad sweep of rivers, the encircling ocean, and the motions of the stars, and yet they leave themselves unnoticed. They do not marvel at themselves. I want to ask you today, if you want to be amazed, to marvel at yourself. Just go ahead, just where you are, just marvel at yourself. As a card that I carry in my wallet, and somebody gave me this years ago, and when I first read it, I thought, oh, this really helps me. It's a verse from the Bible, 1 Timothy 1:18. I give thanks to Christ Jesus our Lord, because he counted me trustworthy in making me his minister. God made me. I was a heathen person. God made me a minister. I don't know what I'm doing. I stumble, I mess up all the time, but God made me a minister. God trusts me with that. I mean, why did I go into this in the first place? Why did you go into the ministry in the first place? I've thought about this recently, given what I do day to day. Yeah. When I first said, I'll go to seminary, because I'm going to go to seminary because I want to meet a budget. Yeah. That'll be so fulfilling to meet a budget. I want to organize committees and placate people that are angry. That'll be great fun. It's a way to spend my days. I want to be part of a denomination that is just worse than dysfunctional. That'll be great fun. Be a part of that. I want to make droll visits to people who will show me the scar from their knee replacement. Oh, they'll say, oh, brother, your prayers really healed me. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't even go into the ministry to preach sermons. I think at the time I thought, I want to stand up in front of people and talk. I've been terrified at the idea of that. I still am. I went into this. I don't know why I went into this. I went into this because I started going to church, and there were some people there that loved me, and I started learning about Jesus, and I just couldn't control myself. I just kind of lost it. I fell in love with this Jesus, and I thought, Jesus, if there's something you want me to do, I don't have much to offer. I'm like a physics science guy. But if I can do anything, I'll try to do whatever that would be. And that's why I went into this. Can I remember that? Can I keep that alive? I mean, I know you can't go back. Lisa and I have been married 26 years. I mean, you can't go back to what it was like when we met and courted and got married. But yeah, we kind of do. Sometimes we pull out the old honeymoon pictures and we look at them. That helps us. That helps us. We pull out the pictures of our children who are now 25, 22, and 18, and we look at their baby pictures and little childhood things. We went to SeaWorld or wherever we went. That kind of helps us. When I think about remembering why I went into this, trying to be amazed once again, I think about Wendell Berry's poem where he thinks about having been married for a while. Here's what he wrote, and I'll be done. Sometimes, hidden from me in daily custom and in trust, so that I live by you unaware as by the beating of my heart, suddenly you flare in my sight, a wild rose blossoming at the edge of the thicket, grace and light where yesterday was only shade. And once more I'm blessed, choosing again what I chose before. Choose again. Be amazed. Preach the gospel.